set the right expectation about my presentation. My presentation is going to be divided in two parts. The first one is going to focus on Biblioarch-Italia, which is a new interesting tool. And in the second part, I will briefly show some broad patterns for Roman Bioarchaeological Studies in Italy. Now let's start with Biblioarch-Italia, which is basically an open access bibliographic database for human bioarchaeological studies, which means that it only includes studies on human remains, and it doesn't include study on funerary and mortuary archaeology only. So we know what is Biblioarch, but why do we need it? And this is, I believe, the most important question. Because first of all, we all know that the interest in human remains is relatively recent. And if you go back to a few years ago, we already see a huge lack of interest, and human remains were basically left aside, not studied in most of the world, we could say. So the first one is promoting human bioarchaeological studies. And I believe this is one of the first important premises on Biblioarch. Now, we also know that wherever the human remains, they've been studied, we know that the archaeological record is fragmentary and incomplete, so we end up with a very small skeletal assemblages, which is very little representative of the human past societies. And for this reason, we know that our discipline would highly benefit from meta-analysis, because this would allow us to make larger comparative studies, which at the moment is very limited and difficult by also some logistic problems. Most of the publications being published in reports or appendices, monograph, or in local journals. And since we are speaking about the Mediterranean area where many languages are spoken, having in a local language, of course, limits the access to the international scholar. Now, this is why in 2021, Nikita et al. Published Biblioarch for the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle East, and they were able to collect over 3,500 papers only on human archaeological studies. Now, following up with this initiative, we decided to extend it and include and make a new database for Italy. And here we have Biblioarch-Italia. Now, the reason why we have a separate database instead of merging with the original one is that we had several inconveniences, let's say. So first of all, the number of papers. We found out that Italy had an incredible number of publications on human remains, which is over 1,000. And this would have caused like a misbalance if combined with the original database, since there we only have few hundreds per country. But also because we had to introduce new filters, which I'm gonna present it to you soon. But let's start with how the database was made. In fact, we started with the research on the major search engine, PubMed, Science Direct, where we use a combination of keywords such as human remains, bioarchaeology, osteoarchaeology, and so on, in combination with Italy, Italian, Sardinia, and Sicily. Now, we did the same on Google Scholar and social media, but this time we also used the Italian equivalent words. So in order to be able to find also non-English and Italian publication. And lastly, we checked the list references for each paper we were able to acquire with the previous methods. And so we got a total of 1,216 papers, which is only for the skeletal assembly studies in Italy. Now, we have to filter these publications in order to make it easy for anyone to find them according to their area of study. Because the first goal the Biblioarch aims at is meta-analysis. So we decided to keep consistent the filters and in special way the keywords. The keywords are a combination of methods and broad area of interest in the analysis of human remains. So we have keywords such as diet, demography, metrics, where, for example, demography means that the author of the publications provide sex and age at death of the human remains, of the skeletons. Now, we also have some overlap, because if you see, for example, stature, if the authors provide the statures, this paper will be tagged with stature, but also with metrics. But it won't happen the other way around. If there are other metrics, but no statures, then it's going to be only metrics. The second important filter, which is the new filter we introduced with Biblioarch-Italia, is the chronology. Now, for the ordered period, we weren't able to be as specific, so we decided to give the keywords such as Paleolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age. And while starting from the Iron Age, we were able to be much more specific and provide the single centuries for each study. And this is also not great because it's more detailed, but also it provides a very user-friendly filter for scholars not familiar with the sub-regional Italian historical path, which was not uniform, of course. Then we have the date of publication, and we can even specify the range. And lastly, we have the region. So we decided to divide Italy in 5 geographical areas, from northern, central, southern, Sardinia, and Sicily. Now, using Biblioarch-Italia, Biblioarch-Italia is already available at the link italia.biblioarch.com, and it contains 3 main pages. The first page is a brief presentation with also information about the support funding for this project. Then we have a page dedicated to our team, and the main page for the data, where you can actually make the search with all of the previously explained filters. Keep in mind that you can enter any combination of the filters. So, for example, for chronology, if you're looking for something specific from the 1st till the 4th century CE, then you can enter all of them at the same time and then click submit. This is what you're going to get. You're going to get the full list in tabs, and each tab is going to provide you all of the information from the publication, starting with the title, the authors, and whatever is available, we also provide the abstract. Now, for all the publication not available in English, we decided also to provide a translation for the title and the abstract. Now, once you made your search, you select your filter. On the bottom, you can see several options. In fact, you might select or export the entire filtered data in both PDF and TSV. Now, let's go to some broad patterns. Now, we decided to compare the overall patterns for Italy from the Paleolithic to the modern age with the Roman studies for this Congress. And those are what we saw. First of all, here we have the number of publications per year, per decade. And what we see is an increasing trend, which is shown very clearly in both the previous the studies in the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean, but also, as we can see, for the overall pattern in Italy. So it is pretty clear. This is a good sign. It means we are on the right path. Then we can also see here the number of studies per themes, per keywords. We can see demography, pathology, diet being at the top, with the highest number of publications, while biodistant and non-metrics being the least present. And this is a pattern that we can see in the overall Italy as well. So something that I believe I forgot to mention is that out of 1,216 papers, the Roman studies are 202 publications. So for this reason, the chart on the right, it is also including the Roman studies, it's including the overall studies as well. And we don't see anyway, as I was saying, we don't see very much. In the middle is more or less the same, there's not much difference. Now, if we look at the studies per chronology or per centuries from the Iron Age, what we see, and there's no surprise in it, is that this is the most studied period, especially the first 3 centuries CE, which is a central part of the Roman Empire, the Roman period. Now, we recently submitted our paper for bibliographic, and we received some nice minor revisions. And our reviewers were asking about, and so we had to question ourselves about why the Roman studies are the most studied in Italy. Unfortunately, we weren't really able to find proper answers. But what we noticed is that in the educational system, there is a great number of available courses in Roman history and Roman archaeology across Europe, but most likely even in other countries outside of Europe. So there's been an important number of new scholars trained in Roman archaeology, and in this case, it makes sense to have a greater number of study. But this is something to go into deeper. So lastly, we have the number of papers per geographical area. Now what we can see is that, again, there's no surprise, Central Italy, Rome is in there. So we have the highest number of publication. And then we can see Northern Italy, Sardinia and Sicily have been very little studied. Now we have to say Southern Italy is the second most studied. However, we have to consider that in Southern Italy there are sites such as Pompeii and the Herculaneum, which are very close to Rome. So this is also might be a reason why the Southern Italy has a high number of publication. While on the right, we can see instead the number of papers per geographical areas from the Paleolithic till modern age. And what we see is a different picture. We see Northern Italy having the highest number of studies with 337, while it doesn't say Sardinia and Sicily being the least studied, but so there is this little change. And this could be either because perhaps there aren't enough sites outside Central Italy, or maybe it's because there is a less interest in investigating the Roman age outside the heart of the Roman Empire, which was Central Italy. Now, thank you very much, and we will also invite you, scholars from all over the world working in Italy, to cooperating with us to help us extending the database and highlight potential correction or omissions, to contact me at my email. And thank you, and have a great meta-analysis, because we need it.